It all started about 20 years ago. I was visiting a homeopathic farmer outside of St. Jacobs, Ontario. Suddenly, the topic got off base and he began to talk about a 1970s fiction novel entitled Alternative 3, which he claimed was actually a true story. It sounded crazy. The story went like this. A small elite group of people were disappearing under the apparent guise of being tapped to work in a think tank abroad. The think tank was actually a base on the moon, itself only a second stage in a process leading to Mars to establish a survival colony for humans. The theme being that we on Earth are doomed to environmental destruction and the human genome must survive. I thought the story was intriguing, but couldn't wrap my head around the idea that we were indeed already on Mars. However, in the tradition of the truth is stranger than fiction, something in my gut told me it might be crazy enough to be true. Fast forward, we now live in a world where the majority of the population lives in absolute poverty. A minority of people consume most of the world's resources, and global financial meltdown is lurking in the shadows. Climate change is all we hear about, scaring collective consciousness towards some form of doomsday. These are apocalyptic times indeed. Maybe there was something to the Mars story. Could there be a survival colony for an elite few? Why not? Then, while researching out-of-place artifacts, I stumble on an internet broadcast about two people claiming to have actually been to Mars, or to have been tapped to go there. Here was no less than the great-granddaughter of a famous US president telling us her Mars recruitment story. Was Alternative 3 a fact? Absurd as it sounded, something stirred in me, and I knew right then I had to try and find out for myself. This is where my journey begins.
Well, my name is Bill Ryan, and I'm one of the co-founders of Project Camelot. And we were inspired at that time, which was in 2006, by Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project, inspired by his Washington National Press Club press conference in May 2001, where he lined up a very impressive array of witnesses in front of an audience and the cameras and a lot of mainstream media press to state clearly on record, really for the first time in the mainstream media, that the governments of the world have been keeping an enormous secret from the citizens. And that secret started at least back in 1947 at the time of the Roswell incident. He did a pretty good job in kicking the ball to start off with about encouraging witnesses, whistleblowers, to come forward, whistleblowers with credibility, people who had signed secrecy oaths with the military, pilots, radar operators, military commanders, people who'd had experiences that they were forbidden to tell for some reason. And these very brave people came forward to start to tell their stories.
If there were two people in the world who could help me get to the truth about Mars, it was definitely Bill Ryan and Carrie Cassidy. Two vigilantes of the disclosure movement, with close ties to the people I was hoping to get to, with a refreshing approach to getting the message out.
For some reason, there's something that is huge that they don't want us to know, and there's a reason for that. And we're very interested in what is being kept from us, and we're very interested in the reason behind it.
I asked Carrie if she felt the whistleblowers coming out could be trusted, and why it seemed suddenly now they felt compelled to let the secrets out.
It's more like the zeitgeist of what we're living through at this time. I think that we are at a time of disclosure. It's not just that governments are suddenly going to disclose secrets. It's that we are moving into a part of the solar system that is stimulating. There's a wave of energy coming at us and through us. And I think human beings are also starting to recognize who they really are. I think that there is a stimulation of DNA happening around the planet. I think that there is a spread of an awareness. Whistleblowers, it's a fascinating study when you get into whistleblowers, because they're very interesting individuals. Usually they're highly intelligent, they're highly talented, and they've been selected to work for these black projects because of their expertise, their intelligence and talents. But at the same time, they're, it's very lonely when you have a secret. And there's something about human beings that makes them want to tell their secret.
And then you have to ask yourself, why would somebody with everything to lose and nothing to gain would come forward and tell a story that's so wild that you'd think that it would just belong in a science fiction movie? And yet there's a mountain of evidence to suggest that what most people would still regard as science fiction is, in fact, incredible fact. There are programs, experimental programs, that have had trillions of dollars invested in them for decades now with the world's brightest and best scientists. And they have taken this material so far, and we have not been told about it, that there really is another caste, if you like, of the human race. It's an insider caste. It's like a club that only invites specific people to be members.
The space program, as most people understand it, is completely a front. But the interesting part of that is that most of the scientists and engineers working in those projects don't realize they're part of a front. What happens is, you could even call it the first tier of a filtering system.
There's credible testimony that human teleportation exists, that faster than light travel exists, that the ability exists to look through portals into a future time, to see probable future timelines, whatever it is that may await the human race. Since the 1950s, trillions of dollars have been invested in deep underground military bases. The abbreviation for that is DUMB, D-U-M-B, but there's nothing dumb about it. These are very smart people who are investing an enormous amount of time, technology, money, and expertise and manpower in creating nothing less than underground cities that are connected by a subterranean, super-fast rail network. We're not privy to this. We don't have tickets into these comfortable underground bunkers, which are equipped with shopping malls and movie theaters and underground gardens to survive, if needed, so we are told, for many, many years, if life on the surface of this planet becomes uninhabitable.
December 21st, 2012 had come and gone. It had been a much anticipated milestone in the awareness community, heralded as the date of the big shift in consciousness. Nothing had happened, but Carrie's words about an energy influx were no mere fantasy. In the film Solar Revolution, German biophysicist Dieter Breurs describes how astronomers discovered a black hole at the center of our galaxy in a region called Sagittarius A, the size of 4 million of our suns. A gas planet's implosion into this black hole has set off a chain reaction of cosmic radiation, which has begun to affect everything in our solar system. Aside from heating all of the planet's cores, it's turning our sun into a huge magnifying lens for space particles and energy waves heading to Earth. Highly charged particles, X-rays and radio waves are now moving through our bodies, and their effects are beginning to show. maybe this is what the Mayas had meant by the Hunab coup. But there's one major cosmic event that is still unresolved: the arrival of a 10th planet, the so-called Planet X. A mysterious body with a massive orbit that, legend has it, only returns in cycles of tens of thousands of years. Its perihelion has been associated with total chaos on Earth. But where is Planet X? Although our leading astronomers began shouting out its discovery as early as the 80s, mysteriously they've all since gone silent. Are the alternative 3 insiders keeping something from the rest of us? Maybe the clue to this puzzle lays with a US space probe Pioneer 10's secret extended mission, and a Vatican insider who has leaked information to those of us paying attention.
At the beginning of the 90s, the American space probe Pioneer 10 had a strange behavior. And some scientists in United Kingdom, with their colleagues in America, found out a deflection of the space probe. A deflection, like the space probe met a body, a very big body, responsible for the deflection. If we give a look to the chronicles of the past, we can find some clues about the possible return of a big solar body, a big celestial body in our solar system. In the Vatican are very worried about the return of Nibiru and of course the implication of its return. According to a Vatican insider, a whistleblower, a Jesuit, who contacted an Italian freelancer named Cristoforo Barbato, the Vatican would have a secret space program called Siloe. The target of the Siloe space program would have been to approach the 10th planet, Nibiru. And we are talking about a sophisticated space probe equipped with electromagnetic propulsion. And Lockheed Martin apparently collaborated with the Vatican. For the launch of the spacecraft, they used a vehicle, a secret vehicle, the Aurora type of vehicle, and the space probe was built in Nevada, in the Area 51. So I can think that there is also a collaboration with the American government. The data were sent and received in Alaska. There would be a radio telescope managed only by Jesuits belonging to the secret Vatican agency called SIV, S-I-V. Until a few years ago, there was a common agreement among the most important scientists in the scientific community that something was out there, something is out there. I think that the Vatican is fully aware of the return of the Nibiru. Americans at the highest levels, at the Pentagon, also the Russians are aware of it. But they are afraid to give the truth to the people because they are afraid of a possible reaction of panic among the population, a panic that they will not be able to control in any way. If really Pioneer 10 did a flyby at the beginning of the 90s, and this celestial body is really the 10th planet Nibiru, according to a mathematician, an American applied mathematician, we don't have so much time in front of us for a perihelion, because we are talking about a date of 2032. And if his calculation are right, planet 10 will be close to Jupiter about in the year 2029. So there is a silence. But I think is the silence before the storm.
Andrew DiBasciago. I'm a lawyer in private practice in Washington State. I hold 5 academic degrees, including a Bachelor's of History from UCLA and a Master of Philosophy from the University of Cambridge. 10 years ago, I began investigating my experiences in DARPA's Project Pegasus in the late 1960s and early 1970s. I was a child participant in the early days of time-space exploration by the US government. Project Pegasus was the real Philadelphia experiment. It was the US time-space program at the time of its emergence. We were working with 2 technologies primarily to access past and future events. The first was a teleporter that was being developed from papers that Nikola Tesla had left at the time of his death in 1943. We were regularly jumping through a device at the old Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, and popping back into view on the grounds of the state capitol complex in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The experience of teleporting was almost emotionally overwhelming for a small child. We had jumped into a vortal tunnel that had been opened up in the fabric of time-space. As Jack Pruitt, one of the team leaders on Project Pegasus, once described it, the teleporter was creating an interstitial chasm in the fabric of time-space. So I found myself rushing forward seemingly at a great rate of speed, but also sometimes I felt I was falling downward, and sometimes I felt I wasn't moving at all. Really what was happening was, rather than the teleporter digitizing us, disintegrating us and then reintegrating us at the destination, it was wrapping the universe around us, and we were passing through to a new location on the Earth. When I would look to the side of the tunnel, I would see bands of light that were moving at an incredible rate of speed. And in them, I could see a multiplicity of events going on on other timelines, rapidly rushing past. And then after several seconds of that, we would see a light at the end of the tunnel. It would approach very quickly, as if it was going to hit us, and we would find footfall in New Mexico. We learned, beginning in the fall of 1970, that we could spend the entire day in New Mexico, and dusk would fall there, and then we would be taken to the Sandia National Labs where the teleport was, and we would jump back to New Jersey and find that it was broad daylight. So they were literally using time travel to conceal the time travel program that was then emerging. The other device we were working with extensively was not a teleporter, it was a device called a chronovisor. A chronovisor is an electro-optical device that propagates a hologram that is so dense that it has a lensing effect by which events that are going on non-locally in the quantum hologram, what we would call past and future events, are brought into the laboratory. And you can use this device either as a technical remote viewing device to see things that are going on in a form sort of cubical cinema, 3-dimensional cinema as it were, or if you're standing on the stage of the device when the hologram is propagated, you experience going to that past time and place.
The Chronovisor worked by receiving, decoding, and reproducing the electromagnetic radiation left behind from events. Along with the visuals, it could also pick up the audio component or sound waves. It sounded like science fiction. But German physicist Ernst Zinkowski met with and discussed the Chronovisor with its inventor, Catholic priest Father Pellegrino Ernetti.
The Chronovisor, according to the reports, was not only able to trace things back from the past, but he was even able to tell about things in the present and even from the future. So this is a completely dangerous thing. You can do with that machine very, very, bad things, I would say. What we call time is nothing real. Time is something which is psychic, and everybody lives in its own time, and it's only a possibility to order things in a sequence. But really there is no time.
My name is Robert Duncan O'Finnan, and I'm a survivor of what was known as Project Talent, which was a sub-project of the infamous MK Ultra. The personality that's sitting here talking right now was put to sleep, and the artificial personality is awakened and does the job that it's commanded to do. I started putting in enough letters together to know that something wasn't right. And then just about 19 years ago now, I was involved in an automobile accident to where my neck was pretty much finished off, and I had to have an MRI done. When I was in the tube and the machine fired up, from what we can understand, there was electromagnetic clashes between the machine and the cranial implant that I have. In that instant, if you can imagine 1,000 TV screens at once, and each screen is a picture, and each picture is a memory. And you know in that instant that all your nightmares, all your daymares were real. The Mars memory came flooding back full bore a couple of years ago. There's bases on Mars, there's underground bases. The surface of Mars isn't exactly what NASA wants people to think that it is. It is a weak atmosphere. It does have weak pressure, but it is definitely survivable. Mars isn't barren. The sky is bluer than they tell you to. It's not as blue as Terra, but it's bluer. It's not the purple like they try to tell us that it is. When I have been shifted from early teenage years from talent over to what most people think of as the Universal Soldier Project or the Super Soldier Project. One of my jobs there was to pilot a supply craft to Mars.
Duncan and I met up on a training field. We don't know if that was orchestrated or not, but they found that we clicked together really well. And so they would send us out as a team and we'd complement each other. He would do a lot of the physical stuff and I would be there to scout for him and to boost him with energy if he needed it.
We went through specialized training together and we did a lot of jobs all over the world together. And in all actuality, she was supposed to have been on this milk run with us, but I vetoed that order. I do recall though, even then, even in the personality of 197, I didn't want to take this run.
We actually had the memories at separate times, and for a couple of years, we didn't know that they fit together until we broke it down and put the pieces together and realized that the injuries that he had were consistent with my memories, and we sort of had this aha moment.
The craft itself was what we call a round nose. If you can imagine a Converse tennis shoe, the toe of the tennis shoe, that was the front end of the fuselage. It was built something like the shuttles that we have now, but much bigger, tremendous engines. And we were vertical lift and takeoff. We did not have to ride piggyback on some solid propellant, 200-year-old technology to be taken into orbit. We were just loaded up, we cruised out the hangar bay, and we lifted straight up.
I was called in one day. They didn't tell me what I was going to be doing. It was kind of a last-minute thing.
There were three of us. I sat in the center chair, which was the command chair, and I had a pilot and a navigator. And I remember vividly, we had very ill feelings about this trip.
They didn't want to tell me anything about what had happened to him. I knew it was something really bad. I was pulled in quickly, I remember, because they had pretty much called it on him. So they had brought me in as a last-ditch effort. I think someone maybe said, well, go ahead and try this, but, you know, it's not going to work.
It took less than an hour from takeoff to we hit Atmo. And when I say Atmo, I mean atmosphere. And as we were going down through the atmosphere to land, we lost all power in the craft and we lost all control. We began to spiral and we hit planet and the ship broke apart. When I came through, I was face down in the dirt and I glanced up and the first thought through my mind was, okay, I survived, I'm alive. And I saw a shadow coming over me. And I could look up enough to see it was part of the fuselage that had broken off in Atmo. And it hit me and it came down across my back. And that's the last thing I remember.
They had Duncan's body on a gurney. I don't know if he had any vital signs or not. I don't think he did, but I don't know for sure. I just remember that his skin was gray and he had lacerations all over his upper body. And he was actually laid out on an autopsy table. He was lying in a very abnormal position, the way, you know, his arms were positioned and his neck. It wasn't how it should be. And I just remember, as a remote viewer, being able to leave my body, I knew that I had a chance to save him because his astral body, his soul, his energy was nearby still. So I climbed on the gurney, I got my body situated, and I just remember taking off like a shot out of my body and into the ether somewhere. I followed the cord of his energy. There still was one. It was very faint, and miraculously I was able to find him at the other end of it still. His astral body was in a very confused state. It was sort of in this in-between place. It was disoriented. He didn't recognize me at first. So I had to give him a really rousing pep talk. He came back.
The blending of fact with fiction was something the creators of Alternative 3 are brilliant at. And this seems to be the technique of choice with respect to leaks of super-secret disclosures. Merging real evidence with falsified or inconsistent aspects intentionally places roadblocks that confound our intellect. The only US-Soviet space collaboration the public had been privy to was Apollo 18, the so-called Apollo-Soyuz test project. We are told the missions ended there. So, are we to believe the sole purpose for this expensive and massive customization of two incompatible space vehicles, prepped for orbital link-up by two superpowers supposedly at odds, was simply a friendly handshake in times of the Cold War? This image was photographed by Apollo 15 lunar orbiter on the dark side of the moon. The photo documents what some researchers believe to be a shipwreck. In 2007, 2 whistleblowers came forward. One, named William Rutledge, asserts he was an Apollo commander, while another, calling himself Moonwalker, anonymously identified himself as a well-known Apollo astronaut. The two began leaking footage into the public, asserting a bold claim. There had been more Apollo missions, Apollo 19 and 20. It was nothing less than a real-life Prometheus story. Executed in total secrecy, those 2 missions may have impacted history more than we could imagine.
The Apollo 20 mission occurred in August 1976. They launched a modified Saturn V from the Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Roll complete and pitches program.
The Apollo 20 mission was a very difficult mission, first of all because they were on the far side of the moon, also because it was a very long mission. According to what they told me, it was a 7 days mission on the surface. 2 astronauts alone on the surface of the moon for 7 days. Both of the missions were American-Soviet programs. Apollo 19 has a crew composed by 2 American and 1 Soviet, a Russian cosmonaut. And also the Apollo 20 mission has a crew composed by 2 Americans, and the third one was a very famous Soviet cosmonaut, Alexei Leonov. The goals of the Apollo 90 missions and the goals of the Apollo 20 mission were the same. The reason of the existence of the Apollo 20 was because the Apollo 19 failed because of an incident in the space, which occurred during the end of the translunar injection maneuver.
Explosive fuel cell problem. Stand by to shut down all fuel cells.
They had different targets. One of them was the alien base, identified before the mission took place. It was a derelict spacecraft, very ancient, maybe 1.5 million years ago. And we are talking about something 4 kilometers long, very big. Inside they found remains of biological life.
Presto, changeover. There's the TV. Oh, beautiful. I'm glad to hear that. Yes, sir.
have to reach one of the two triangular objects that they identified before the mission took place. They found a creature which was named Mona Lisa, apparently a female creature, inside one of the two triangular objects. And they brought on board this creature.
What we're seeing is an alleged EBE named Mona Lisa. Supposedly, she was the pilot of one of the triangular craft. The facial attachments, it was suggested, were some kind of navigational implant. And she's wearing what could be the precursor to modern-day digital circuit clothing. But the most shocking thing was, she was registering signs of life.
She was not dead, she was not alive, a sort of suspended animation.
There were other astonishing aspects to the footage. As the camera points out of the lunar module window, we can clearly make out that tower from the ancient city footage. We also see a Soviet lunar rover, Lunokhod, parked outside, further suggestion of a continuing US-Soviet collaboration. But there were also some serious problems with the footage. To a trained eye, this was clearly a composite of two images, made most obvious when we momentarily see through the person doing the exam. With the floating foreground, clearly this material has been manipulated. So, was it all just an elaborate hoax? But who would go to all the trouble to stage such a sophisticated fake disclosure, produce video footage so cloaked in realism it rivals even big-budget Hollywood sci-fi productions, and all for no apparent monetary gain or public acclaim?
The Apollo 20 footage of the so-called EBE Mona Lisa is authentic, but it is manipulated. It seems an attempt to disinformation. There are two very interesting clues about the contradictory aspects of the story. One of them is the presence of a frame of the Apollo 11 mission at the beginning of the flyover of the huge cigar-shaped object made by the lunar module Phoenix. It doesn't make any sense to put a frame which belongs to another mission.
Unless maybe it was the only possible way to tell the incredible truth. Viewed as a whole, the evidence might well be deeply embedded pieces of a cleverly thought-out jigsaw puzzle. Hide enough truth of what really happened out in the open, leave the breadcrumbs for future generations to solve. There were definitely some very cool parameters involved.
We had the composition of images, we had the voice, the dialogue among the mission control and the astronaut David Scott of the Apollo 15 mission.
Presto changeo, there's the TV.
And then we have the tracks of the rover of another mission. My idea is that David Scott was a key player in this story. There are several astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong. David Scott could be one of them, the commander of the Apollo 19, who was a Gemini astronaut and also an Apollo astronaut. All of them are involved in different ways in the story of Apollo 19 and Apollo 20. So maybe there is a hidden message behind the footage.
I had seen to what extent those dangling evidence in front of our eyes would go to blend fact with fiction. It was as though someone on the inside was authorized to start sharing kernels of the truth, but only so long as it was encrypted with cleverly manipulated disclosures. So let's entertain the idea that there is a hidden faction of humans already on Mars, led by a breakaway civilization, They would probably do whatever it takes to keep others from discovering or trespassing into their own private Elysium, including photo manipulation. But forensic photography researchers started taking NASA-published material under their scopes, and the results cast serious doubt on the idea that, even if it had been a frozen body for a time, the Mars of now no longer seems to be a dry, barren planet devoid of life. And when you slice through layer by layer of NASA-induced blur and discoloration, you can unveil details on the surface of Mars that appear amazingly similar to buildings, shadows, and all. These are not pixel errors. You certainly have to marvel at how long they've duped all of us into thinking that Mars has a red sky and is only available in sepia tones. The final lead Lucas Gantamburlo had given me was this picture. It was supposedly Buzz Aldrin on the surface of Mars in 1970. There may have been super-secret missions to the moon, but there was also a collaboration between the US and the Soviets, 13 missions in all, for a project called Red Sun, the purpose of which was to set up a base on Mars. This would be the real-life version of Alternative 3. According to the story, as part of Project Red Sun, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong had been the first two men on Mars, but they were there in 1970, roughly the same time they were supposedly on the moon. So either they were never on Mars, or if they were, the Apollo 11 astronaut we saw taking one small step for mankind on the moon might not be who we think it was. Was the man who took that fateful step in 1969 in reality somebody else?
Such a long time. The eye on the, not the collapsed side, but the eye on the full side had a pupil, an iris, and a white. I'm not saying in color, but you could definitely see those three parts. And there were, here in the mouth area, facing me on that computer screen, were teeth. The teeth had lines. And I was so startled. I was not prepared for anything that vivid and that clear. Have any of you anywhere on this planet seen a photograph with those details of the face on Mars? No, but not in the public.
While the Sidonian Plateau became the prime location for debunkers and believers alike, Dr. J.J. Hertog was exploring more compelling evidence of a link between Earth and Mars. Could this link be the thread of continuity between our worlds, from antiquity right up through to modern times? Maybe there was something else on the red planet the insiders had good reason to keep to themselves.
According to Arab historians, at the time the foundations of the city of Cairo were laid, there was a special orientation with Mars. And why do we have, even in the New Testament of our Bible, a reference by the Apostle Paul on Mars Hill to the Greek philosophers, suggesting that they take a look at what could be called the temples of the gods in Greek mythology or Greek legend. Certain alignments and aerial perspectives were specifically there in Egypt with respect to Mars, with the traditions of the Zulu people in East Africa, with the traditions of the peoples of the Orient, and certainly with the peoples of Central and South America, all who are, should we say, proclaiming the fact that we need to take a second look at Mars and recognize that something happened there that connected the earlier mythology, intellectual history, and cosmology of ancient civilization with this mysterious sister planet.
These things that I see here cast perfect pyramidical shadows upon the ground. And as a man who makes statues and other items of art, I know a pyramid when I see one. And here's another thing, whatever these structures are, they are so durable that they have kept their shape in spite of the terrible winds that are said to blow upon the plains of the planet Mars.
These documents beg the question, are we somehow connected? That is, are the pyramids on Earth connected with those on Mars? Is it possible that the pyramids on Mars are stepping stones to even a greater mystery of extrasolar intelligence that may have been behind the engineering of these massive landforms in the Elysium Quadrangle, some as large as 700 times the size of the Great Pyramid at Giza?
Hello, Frank. We know you've been out searching. We've been watching, waiting for you to wake up. We've been waiting for all of you to wake up. You see, the game has been going on since the beginning. And now we are nearing an end. It's the game where you see bad as evil and good as just. But this is not entirely true. Think of us as an invisible force that nudges you again and again, patiently, to make false decisions. But not because we want to destroy you. It's because we want you to learn to recognize what is really going on. Because we need you to. It's the only way we can all move on together. So where do we all end up? Well, we'll leave that up to you.